After 15 years of silent success, my family finally discovered my net worth, and their reaction was stunning. The room fell silent, save for the faint hum of the ceiling fan above us. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as if it were trying to escape its confines. 15 years, a decade and a half, of quietly building an empire while living under the radar had finally come crashing into the open like waves against a fragile shore. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Secrets are delicate things. They can be nurtured or shattered with just one misplaced word. And today, that single word had slipped out. It all began when I was 24, fresh out of college with dreams larger than the small town I grew up in. Our family wasn't poor by any means, but we weren't wealthy either. We lived paycheck to paycheck, scraping together enough to keep food on the table and clothes on our backs. My parents worked tirelessly, my father at the local factory, his hands calloused from years of manual labor, and my mother cleaning houses during the day before coming home to cook dinner for us every night. They taught me the value of hard work, resilience, and humility. But what they didn't teach me was how to dream beyond the boundaries of practicality. When I graduated, everyone expected me to follow the path laid out before me, find a stable job, settle down, start a family. That's what success looked like in our world, a predictable life devoid of risks or grandeur. But deep inside, I yearned for something more. Something bigger. I wanted to leave a mark on the world, not just exist within it. So, armed with nothing but determination and a laptop, I moved to the city and started freelancing as a graphic designer. It wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't lucrative at first, but it gave me freedom, the kind of freedom most people only dream about. The early days were grueling. I spent countless nights hunched over my desk, fueled by cheap coffee and sheer willpower. Rejection after rejection came flooding in, each email a dagger to my confidence. But then, something shifted. A client loved my work so much that they recommended me to others, and slowly, word spread. What started as a trickle turned into a steady stream of projects. Before I knew it, I had built a name for myself in the industry. Clients from across the globe sought me out, willing to pay top dollar for my designs. I reinvested every penny I earned back into my business, hiring assistants, renting office space, and eventually launching my own design agency. But here's the thing, no one in my family knew. Not really. Oh, they saw glimpses of my success. New clothes, occasional vacations, a nicer car, but I always downplayed it. Just doing okay, I'd say with a shrug whenever they asked. To them, I was still the same girl who used to borrow money for gas and scrimp on groceries. I told myself it was easier this way. Easier to avoid questions, expectations, and judgments. Easier to protect the fragile balance between who I was and who I had become. And so I kept my wealth hidden, not out of shame but out of fear. Fear of alienating the people I loved most. Fear of being seen differently. Fear of losing the connection that tied me to my roots. For 15 years, I lived a double life, balancing the simplicity of home with the complexity of my professional achievements. Until now. The discovery happened on a seemingly ordinary Sunday afternoon. My siblings, nieces, nephews, and parents had gathered at my childhood home for our weekly family lunch. These gatherings were sacred traditions, moments where time seemed to stand still. Laughter echoed through the house as plates clinked and stories unfolded. It was comforting, familiar, and safe, or so I thought. Midway through dessert, my brother Alex leaned back in his chair, his face flushed from laughter. "You know," he said, pointing his fork at me, "I've been meaning to ask you something. How do you afford those fancy vacations? You're always jetting off somewhere exotic." A collective murmur rippled through the room. My mother paused mid-bite, her fork hovering inches from her mouth. My father raised an eyebrow, curiosity etched across his weathered face. Everyone turned to look at me, waiting for an answer. My throat tightened. This was the moment I had dreaded for years, the moment when the truth would no longer fit neatly into the box I had created for it. I stammered, searching for words that wouldn't betray me. "I've just been saving up, you know? Cutting corners wherever I can." Alex snorted. "Saving up? Come on, sis. You don't even live frugally. You eat out all the time, drive a luxury car, and wear designer clothes. Don't tell me you're pinching pennies." Heat crept up my neck, spreading across my cheeks. He was right, of course. I couldn't lie anymore. Not convincingly, anyway. So I took a deep breath and decided to come clean, at least partially. Fine, I said, forcing a laugh. Maybe I've done a little better than I let on. My business has grown over the years, and I've been fortunate enough to make some good investments. Nothing crazy though. My sister-in-law Sarah tilted her head, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. Investments? Like what? I hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. Real estate, mostly. Some stocks. Nothing too exciting. Sarah exchanged a glance with Alex, her expression unreadable. Then she pulled out her phone and tapped furiously at the screen. Wait a second, she muttered. Let me check something. My stomach dropped. I watched as she scrolled through articles and images, her brow furrowing deeper with each passing second. Finally, she looked up, her mouth agape. Oh my God, she whispered. Do you realize your company is worth millions? Millions. The room erupted into chaos. Gasps filled the air as everyone scrambled to grab their phones and verify Sarah's claim. Within minutes, they were bombarding me with questions, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of disbelief and astonishment. How long have you known? Why didn't you tell us sooner? Are you serious right now? I sat there frozen, unable to process the whirlwind unfolding around me. My parents stared at me, their expressions a mix of pride, confusion, and hurt. Hurt because I had kept such a significant part of my life hidden from them. Hurt because, in their eyes, I had chosen secrecy over trust. As the initial shock wore off, the conversation shifted to something darker. Accusations flew like arrows, each one piercing deeper than the last. You've been lying to us. Alex exclaimed, slamming his fist on the table. All these years, we thought you were struggling, just like the rest of us. And the whole time, you were sitting on a gold mine. No, that's not true. I protested, tears welling in my eyes. I never lied. I just omitted certain details. I didn't want things to change between us. Well, guess what? Sarah snapped. Things have changed. Whether you like it or not, you're not the same person anymore. You're rich. Filthy rich. And you've been pretending otherwise. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. She wasn't wrong, but hearing it spoken aloud made it feel real in a way I hadn't anticipated. The weight of my deception pressed down on me, suffocating and unrelenting. My mother reached across the table, placing a trembling hand over mine. Her touch was gentle, yet it carried the weight of decades of love and sacrifice. Sweetheart, she said softly, why didn't you trust us? Why did you feel the need to hide this from your own family? Her question cut straight to the core of my guilt. Why indeed? Was it fear? Pride? Or simply the belief that keeping my success to myself would spare them from feeling inadequate or jealous? Whatever the reason, it no longer mattered. The damage was done. In the days that followed, tension lingered in the air like a storm cloud refusing to dissipate. Conversations were strained, smiles forced, and silences heavy with unspoken emotions. Each interaction felt like walking on eggshells, unsure of when the fragile peace would shatter once again. Yet amidst the turmoil, there were moments of clarity. Moments when I allowed myself to reflect on the choices that led me here. I thought about the sacrifices I had made, the sleepless nights, the missed holidays, the endless hustle, and wondered if it had all been worth it. Had I truly achieved success if it came at the cost of alienating the people I loved most? One evening, as I sat alone on the porch of my childhood home, staring out at the stars, my father joined me. He didn't say anything at first, simply sat beside me, his presence offering a quiet comfort. After several minutes of companionable silence, he spoke. Your mother and I raised you to be ambitious, he said, his voice gravelly with age. We wanted you to chase your dreams, no matter how big or small. But we also taught you the importance of honesty and humility. Somewhere along the way, I think you lost sight of that. His words struck a chord deep within me. Humility. Honesty. Two principles I had abandoned in pursuit of greatness. Tears streamed down my face as I nodded, unable to meet his gaze. I'm sorry, Dad, I whispered. I never meant to hurt anyone. I didn't know how to reconcile who I am now with who I used to be. He sighed, patting my hand gently. That's the thing about growth, sweetheart. It's messy. Painful, even. But it's necessary. You can't move forward without leaving something behind. The trick is figuring out what's worth holding on to and what needs to be let go. His advice resonated with me, planting a seed of hope in the midst of despair. Perhaps this revelation, painful as it was, could serve as a catalyst for change, for both me and my family. Perhaps it wasn't too late to rebuild the bridges I had burned. But as I gazed up at the vast expanse of stars above, I couldn't shake the feeling that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. Challenges I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The days that followed were a blur of introspection and tentative reconciliation. I found myself oscillating between guilt for the secrets I'd kept and resolve to mend what had been broken. My father's words lingered in my mind like an echo, reminding me that growth is often messy and uncomfortable. But how could I begin to repair the fractures within my family? How could I bridge the gap between who they thought I was and who I had become? I decided to start small. The next morning, I woke up early, brewed a pot of coffee, and called my mother. She answered on the third ring, her voice groggy but warm. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, though there was a hesitancy in her tone, a residue of the tension from our last conversation. "Hey, Mom," I replied, clutching the phone tightly. "Do you have time to talk today? Maybe we can meet for lunch." There was a pause, just long enough to make my heart skip a beat. Then she sighed softly. "Of course, honey. I'll always have time for you." Her response brought tears to my eyes, though I tried to blink them away before she noticed. We agreed to meet at her favorite cafe downtown, a quaint little place with mismatched furniture and the smell of freshly baked bread wafting through the air. As I drove there later that afternoon, I rehearsed what I wanted to say over and over in my head, but none of it felt adequate. Words seemed too fragile to capture the weight of everything I needed to express. When I arrived, she was already seated by the window, sipping tea and scrolling through her phone. Her face lit up when she saw me, and for a moment, all the complications melted away. She stood up, pulling me into a tight hug that smelled faintly of lavender and nostalgia. It reminded me of childhood mornings when I would wake up sick, and she'd sit beside me, stroking my hair until I fell back asleep. We ordered sandwiches and salads, making idle chit-chat about the weather and her garden as if nothing had changed. But beneath the surface, the unspoken questions hung heavy in the air. Finally, after the waiter cleared our plates, I took a deep breath and plunged into the abyss. "Mom," I began, twisting my napkin nervously in my lap, "I owe you an apology. A big one. For keeping so much from you, from everyone. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, but I know I did. And I'm so sorry." She studied me for a moment, her gaze steady yet kind. "Honey," she said gently, "we're not mad because you succeeded. We're proud of you, that part hasn't changed. What hurts is that you felt like you couldn't share it with us. Like you had to carry this burden alone." Her words hit me harder than any accusation ever could. They weren't angry or accusatory, they were filled with love and understanding, which somehow made them sting even more. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I didn't want things to change," I admitted. "I was scared that once you knew, once everyone knew, I wouldn't be the same person anymore. That I'd lose the connection we've always had." She reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. Her touch was firm but gentle, grounding me in a way I desperately needed. "You'll always be my daughter," she said firmly. "No amount of money or success will ever change that. But relationships grow too, sweetheart. They evolve. You can't hold on to the past so tightly that you suffocate the present." Her wisdom struck a chord deep within me. I realized then that my fear of losing my identity wasn't just about my family, it was about me. I had clung to the image of myself as the struggling, hard-working girl because it felt safe. Familiar. Admitting that I had grown beyond that version of myself meant confronting the unknown, and that terrified me. Over the next few weeks, I made a conscious effort to reconnect with each member of my family individually. With Alex, it was awkward at first. He still harbored resentment, accusing me of flaunting my wealth while pretending to be one of them. But during one particularly heated argument, I broke down and confessed something I hadn't even admitted to myself. "I didn't tell you because I was ashamed," I blurted out, tears streaming down my face. "Ashamed that I had opportunities you didn't. Ashamed that I left and built this life while you stayed behind to take care of Mom and Dad." His expression softened, the anger in his eyes giving way to empathy. "That's not your fault, sis," he said quietly. "We all make choices. Yours just led you down a different path. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It wasn't forgiveness, yet, but it was a start. Slowly, painstakingly, we began to rebuild our bond, piece by fragile piece. With Sarah, it was easier. She was pragmatic and direct, qualities I admired even when they cut too close to the bone. Over coffee one afternoon, she challenged me to use my resources to help others, not as a form of penance, but as a way to honor the privilege I'd been given. You have the power to make a difference, she said earnestly. Don't waste it. Her words inspired me to think bigger, to consider ways I could give back without drawing attention to myself. I started quietly funding scholarships for underprivileged students in my hometown, donating to local charities, and mentoring young entrepreneurs who reminded me of my younger self. Each act of generosity felt like a step toward redemption, a way to reconcile my past with my present. But perhaps the most profound shift came in my relationship with my father. One evening, as we sat together on the porch watching the sunset, he handed me a worn leather journal. This belonged to your grandfather, he explained, his voice thick with emotion. He wrote in it every night before bed. Thought maybe you'd like to read it. Curious, I opened the journal and began flipping through its pages. Inside were stories of struggle and triumph, dreams both realized and deferred. There were entries about financial hardships, sacrifices made for the sake of family, and quiet moments of joy found in the simplest pleasures. As I read, I felt a deep sense of connection, not only to my grandfather but to the legacy of resilience that ran through my veins. You know, my father said, breaking the silence, he always said success isn't measured by how much you accumulate, but by how much you contribute. By the lives you touch along the way. His words resonated deeply, planting a seed of purpose within me. Success, I realized, wasn't just about personal achievement, it was about impact. About leaving the world better than I found it. As the months passed, I began to embrace my new reality, not as a source of shame or pride, but as a responsibility. I opened up to my family about my journey, sharing both the highs and the lows. I showed them the late-night emails, the rejected proposals, the moments of doubt that nearly broke me. In doing so, I humanized myself again, reminding them, and myself, that behind the net worth and accolades was still the same girl who used to dream big under the stars. And slowly, excruciatingly slowly, the walls between us began to crumble. Conversations became less guarded, laughter more genuine. Though the scars of betrayal remained, they served as reminders of the fragility of trust, and the beauty of its restoration. Yet despite the progress, I couldn't shake the feeling that my journey was far from over. There were still unanswered questions, unresolved tensions, and lingering fears. Would I ever truly feel whole again? Could I find balance between the person I had become and the roots that anchored me? One thing was certain, the road ahead would require courage, vulnerability, and an unwavering commitment to authenticity. And though I didn't have all the answers, I knew one thing for sure, I was ready to face whatever came next.